And welcome back, everybody. Thanks for sticking with us. Karen Foresti Hempson's our guest. This is her book, Beanpickers, and it is portraits of people who did that work. And in this area, it was big. Any idea how many people we're talking about? We're talking hundreds, thousands that did this?
Don't have a set figure, but I would say thousands. I think that was pretty much the routine. When you arrived here as an immigrant, you had to have a sponsor you. And that was somebody that could vouch for you. Maybe it could be a relative or a padrone, somebody who would greet you. And that was the whole idea. I mean, America was quite rural in the 20s and 30s, and so there were a lot of farms. So that was pretty much understood that that's where they'll go.
One of the farms that was big in this area, and which you mentioned in the book, was a name that'll, I think, ring a bell with people, Hinman.
Right.
And they were up on, well, they were in various locations, weren't they?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, how did you get into the Hinman?
Well, my aunt, who was 97 years old, that's my father's sister, she's the one that told me that everybody knew that the farmer, he owned land or rented land in Deansboro and Vernon, so everybody knew that Hinman was the man, you know. And I went to a historical society in the town of Madison and found a picture of him. And I did try to contact the family because they still are, many of them are still farmers.
Are we doing any manual bean picking, or is it all mechanized now?
I believe it's all mechanized. And you know, I think whatever's left over, I guess people in the area could come and pick what they want, but after the machines go through.
This must be, and I know we were talking during the break, you go into schools and talk about this. This must be kind of an awakening for school kids, this whole history, yes?
Well, I've been an educator for 40 years, and I started out teaching junior high. And the 13, 14-year-olds, and the textbook just, you know how textbooks are. They would explain the Great Depression as many people were out of work. And if you really read a personal narrative and how someone is suffering or couldn't afford to buy something, or they got lice in their hair in the fields, then it becomes real to them, and it adds to their depth of understanding. And for 40 years, I've taught junior high, and I also taught at the college level. I taught social studies education at the college level, and always used autobiographies and memoir so that they could truly understand what would motivate somebody. Like what would motivate Jackie Robinson, for example, to take the abuse he took on the fields, and to learn his story gives them depth of understanding.
What were the living conditions like?
Well, the shacks there's usually like 10 doors. They were like long houses. And so they were just very, very narrow rooms. That was it, no other room, just one room. On one side of the room was hay, that was where the boys slept. And on the other side was where the girls slept. And if there was a table there, there's probably not enough chairs for all the children that came. There was probably shelves for their flour, because they did bake bread. Every Sunday was bread day. The kitchens were outside. There was usually one stove for 10 families. So when that bell rang for them to come off the fields at 7 o'clock at night, it was like a mad dash for them to get to the stoves and get their supper cooking.
Outhouses?
Definitely outhouses. Which, you know, there was I could just imagine the sanitation problem with outhouses. There wasn't a way to wash your hands. And my other aunt came down with diphtheria, and she was in the hospital at 2 years old for almost a year. Actually, the child next to her in the bed died. So, yeah, they had to deal with 19th century diseases.
The services that were at these, what do you call them, camps, or what's the best
Well,
word?
they were called shackers. So
Shackers.
at the shacks is what when you talk to a bean picker, that's how they refer it.
And there really was nothing there, right? I mean, if you needed a store.
There was a general store. As a matter of fact, Hinman did own a general store in Deansboro, and I was, through a historical society, managed to get a list of all the things you can buy from him. Babies are born in the fields, so they would call a midwife, and they would have their babies right in the fields.
The young people that were of school age, of course, I guess summers you're out of school, so
Right.
that's not that much of an issue.
You mean for the children?
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. They oftentimes the older kids would stay through September, through the second week or third week in September, and go and pick hops as well. And sometimes the children were sent home, maybe with an aunt, and some of the other adults would stay in the fields and just keep picking.
What time would they start in the morning?
About 7. The horn would go off at 7 in the morning, and then it would blow again for lunch, and then again at 7 at night. And water was only brought a couple of times during the day. You had to have a container. So you had to wait for the water truck in order for you to get some water.
And for lunch, what would they do for lunch?
That, talking to Italians, they always ate well. They would just eat greens and eggs, peppers and eggs, maybe some salami that the father would bring over the weekend. So usually I would say sandwiches.
Okay. We're going to take a short break. We're going to be back and talk with Karen Foresti Hempson about her book, Beanpickers. Short break, right back.